ICQ Podcast episode 453, Q&A Spring 2025. Well, hello and welcome, amateur radio enthusiasts, to episode 453 of your ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported this episode by our monthly and subscription donors. In this episode, we join Martin M1MRB, Chris, Mike 0, Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike 0, Sierra Golf Lima, Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, and Leslie, Golf 0, Charlie India Bravo, to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BRY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is our spring Q&A offering. Well, as always, it's our very kind donors that keep your ICQ podcast advert free, and we'd like to thank the monthly and subscription donors who have sent their subscriptions our way to keep our show advert free. We hope you really enjoy what we do here at the ICQ Podcast and you'd like to support us, and you can do it in a very easy way by going to ICQpodcast.com/donate, where there's an easy donation option there where you can either do a one-off donation or set up a subscription donation that really does support your show. So please do consider us if you get value from our show or our previous shows and you would love to keep us advert free. That's how you do it. Right, we're going to join Martin, Chris, Martin, Frank and Leslie to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur radio news, including nuclear batteries and querying UK exam questions. As always, hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to this week's ICQ podcast and tonight's news roundtable for episode 453. They're ramping up all the time. Tonight, I have Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH, with me.
And very good evening, Martin and the rest of the gang. Hopefully we're all doing really well.
Yeah, I hope so. I also have Mr. Martin Rothwell, M0SGL. Hi, mate.
Hello, how you doing?
Oh, I'm ducking and diving as always. Mrs. B is
running you ragged.
She's running me ragged at the moment, but I'm getting there. Okay, across the other side of the pond, we have Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH. Hi, Frank.
Hey, Martin and everybody. You blokes in London can run, but you can't hide. I have a gadget on my desktop that tells me when you guys go in London on a different time than UTC. So I've got them both on my desktop. So just be aware. I know what time it is where you are.
Is that gadget called a clock, Frank?
It looks just like one, Martin.
Because we've had them for years. You know that, right?
Well, the sundials are hard to part with.
Yeah, no problems. Well, I noticed in Linux, the clock app in Linux now on certainly 2.2404, you can have multiple clocks and it tells you the time in multiple parts of the world. And I was playing with that earlier today. So that's a good one. But anyway, he's back by popular demand. He really is.
Popular demand of one.
Yeah.
Hang on, Martin, build it up. Come on, drum roll.
Go on, go for it. Leslie is back with us.
Good evening, all. Good evening, Martin. I was going to mention that every year we have to change the clocks back and move the stones at Stonehenge. It's the same every year. Why don't we just?
It's so hard.
Leave them where they are.
You know what? I actually drove past Stonehenge Saturday and drove back on Sunday, and I swear they'd moved. And I'm not joking either.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, dear. Mr. Bill Barnes may join us a little bit later on. Bill's got to work at the moment. His work called him in and he needs to do some things. So Bill might join us a little bit later on. But if not, he'll be back for the next episode he's on. Right, let's get started. We've got a follow-up story because we kind of talked about this a few episodes back, but there's now a safe nuclear battery that could last for decades on a single charge. Now, okay, this is a small battery at the moment and it's experimental, but it is moving forward. So I know that you've got problems, Frank, with power and one thing and another, and so we're going to let you go first on this one. So over to you, Frank.
Okay, well, amateur radio's certainly taken a real shine to portable power with the rise of POTA and IOTA and things like that. In the past, we covered a number of venues of new power sources, particularly for portable. And this one follows up on work on a nuclear battery. And people go, "Oh, nuclear! Well, why would we ever do that?" Well, some South Korean scientists have developed a prototype, and it does use carbon-14, which could hurt you unless it's shielded. And I won't steal the entire story, but apparently they have increased the efficiency about 5-fold, which you might not think that's great, but for battery production, that's a leap ahead. So imagine in the future buying a Baofeng with a battery that lasts forever relative to the lifetime of the HT. So, Martin, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, I was to say, that'd be interesting. Yeah, battery never run out. I mean, the one I'd hope for is, electric cars that the battery never runs out. The car dies before the battery. But that could come. Not necessarily the next 20 years, but it will come, guys. Leslie, you were a bit worried about the dangers of this, weren't you?
I was like, yeah, right, it's not coming in my pocket. I tell you, I've had too many batteries burst into flames and been physically chucked out the window because my pocket got a little bit hot. But anyway, that's another story. Seriously, though, if you look at things like solar panels, when they came out, they were pretty inefficient and very expensive. Batteries we've got now, I know they've come on leaps and bounds, but with different types of batteries and improved efficiency and all that. But the equipment side of things has gone on quantum leaps, if you like. So if I was to put money in any sort of industry field, it would be in batteries, because that's going to be the next 20, 30 years. I think that's going to be the big changes and the big technological innovations. Now, can I prove that? No, but that's just, I got a feeling that it's going to come along a long, long way, and things will change. Over to you.
Yeah, I agree with you, because we are in a more mobile world these days. Everybody has a phone in their pocket. People are being tracked, computer stuff and all that. Loads of other things that probably happen that I don't even understand. But we are in a more mobile world, so battery technology needs to keep up, and if it doesn't, then the world's going to stagnate. What do you think, Martin?
I'm not thrilled about this. They say radiation can be stopped by a thin piece of aluminium. Yet you look when you go like on the trains and things, and we like our public transport provider in London, they're seemingly getting upset by lithium batteries in e-scooters and bikes. God knows, don't tell them what they put inside phones and things. But we're talking about building batteries based on nuclear technology. I'm just not comfortable with this. There's so much that can genuinely go wrong. I mean, I know you shouldn't, and I know the instructions say you don't. You shouldn't do it. But come on, we've all taken batteries apart, haven't we? We've always pulled them apart, and lithium will burn you. You can see them. Go online, you can see the lithium going and flaring up. Nuclear in batteries, no thank you. So, it only takes an idiot to go in there and let's say how this works, and pulls it apart. One of the comments in here, radiocarbon is already a byproduct of nuclear power plants, is therefore cheap, readily available, and easy to recycle. Readily available, and that takes me back and makes me think of the quote from, it was ahead of its time, from Doc Brown in Back to the Future. I'm sure in 1985, it's a little plutonium's available in every corner drugstore, but in 1955, it's a little bit hard to come by. Okay, we're not talking about plutonium, we're talking about a different product, but it does scare me. The potential uses of it, they can't make a phone battery at the moment that lasts for a week like the old Nokias used to. Maybe they can, there's potential for having a battery that lasts in a phone. You mentioned the electric car. I like the concept of a car that you don't have to stop and fill up. You don't have to charge, that sort of thing. I think the tax man might stop that, because, of course, petrol has a very heavy tax on it. In fact, the majority of the cost of petrol is tax, which ironically you're taxed on with VAT. That's a whole other story. Let's not get into that. But also, as they increase the capacity of these batteries, you talk about a potentially, in okay, it's not going to be infinite, but a potentially infinite battery that could last, decades. How long before you could buy perhaps a battery like that runs your house, and then you don't have to pay electric company, and then you just got that, it just runs that, it's all good. I don't know. It's an interesting story. It's an interesting piece of tech. It is not something that I'm comfortable with people playing with. That unless it's they're going to put it. If you're going to put it in a satellite, I suppose, and run your satellites and more tech up there, but not on the ground, not in people's pockets. Thanks.
No, Martin, I hear where you're coming from. I think the thing is, there are always going to be idiots. There are always going to be people who do stupid things.
Yes, I try things at home. I am the reason that warning is printed on things.
All right. I mean, I had a video that I used to show on training courses of a laptop going up with lithium batteries and catching fire when it was abused. But it was abused, so there you go. Chris, we left you anything to say on this one?
Well, I think this one's quite exciting. I understand Martin's concerns. I think if we can harness this, I mean, petrol's extremely dangerous stuff. I think someone said if nowadays someone invented the petrol car, there's nowhere petrol or gasoline, I suppose, as you call it in the States, not something we'd let us play with. But now it's established, we don't get a choice. But no, I think this is potentially quite exciting. As other Martin was saying, your phone's got to be charged pretty much every day. More and more things, as you were saying, Martin Butler was saying, more and more mobile devices that have batteries inside them. But, the majority, in your house, a lot of things are powered by electrical energy. Today we have to have centralised power stations. We've got a whole infrastructure in place to then take that energy and distribute it to your house and the factories and the offices. All that could change if you've got some kind of permanent power supply you could have in your house or in your pocket or whatever. All that might change, and that would dramatically change the way the world works. If you've got vehicles that don't require, have a permanent source of energy inside them from the factory, you wouldn't necessarily need to have, dig for oil and burn. It could change the climate. You wouldn't necessarily need to burn fossil fuels. This could have a huge impact. If there's a lot of work to do. Right now, it's a very small battery that fits in. Can power a small device, but in the years to come, maybe 100 years time, we may have, something similar for lots of uses. I mean, you think about a nuclear-powered submarine. They run from a nuclear, essentially a small nuclear power station, a nuclear reactor that sits inside something the size of a trash can or rubbish bin, and it powers a whole submarine pretty much for the life of the submarine. However, there is the safety aspects. We have got, these are things not to be messed around with. There's all kinds of risks around getting this right. It's important that this is done in a very safe way, and I'm sure there'll be lots of regulations around how this, if this does, becomes a successful invention, then yes, there'll be lots of regulation about how these things have to be taken care of. I'm surprised there hasn't been somebody on. Well, there's a TV program here called Dragon's Den. I think there's a similar program in the States called Shark Tank, where people go on and try and get investments. And I would imagine that those guys would snap their hand off to get to invest in this and potentially make a lot of money. But yeah, kind of very interesting. We'll see. We'll keep a close eye on this one and see how this progresses. It could be an exciting thing for the future.
Yeah, well, technology's moved on phenomenally, even in the last 20 years. So it is nice to see that battery technology probably will keep up with it. So yeah, we'll wait and see, I think, is the good one. I just hope it just doesn't get killed off by one of the big companies and go from there. Right, next news story. Radio Ham students and scientists were at the 2025 HamSCI workshop. Leslie, do you want to go first on this one? It looks like it was a good event that they had there.
I had a look at the video, Martin. They were doing some really, really interesting work. I'm not too keen on the contest stuff, I've got to admit, but the project that really caught my eye was there was one student doing some work on an IO sounder, basically send the the signal straight up, straight down, and then from that you can work out what's happening in the ionosphere. So that's one that caught my eye. I think they're getting involved in tremendous projects, and more power to their elbow. And it's good for the hobby as well. Over to you, Martin.
Yeah. Well, the HamSCI guys, we did interview them last time I was out in Dayton. I think it was Chris and myself, and they do a really good job. So, Martin, what do you think on this one?
I just have a quick read through it. It does sound like a sort of almost a massive hamfest or convention type thing, with people getting together and sharing ideas. I haven't had too much of a chance to dive into the story itself. It does say there's a short video of the workshop's poster session on the ARRL's YouTube channel. I shall certainly be checking it out and seeing what's going on. I wonder if there's any recording of any of the talks or presentations and demonstrations and stuff. I'd be interested to know more. Didn't know it was happening, but how did people... It said people joined... Some 175 students, professors, and amateur radio operators from around the world gathered in person and virtually to share research, educate each other, and network. How did people get invited? How do they turn up? Was this a stream? Was it? I don't know. I'd like to know more and how people got involved with it.
Yeah, they did actually publish that this was happening, and the word links to this. So unfortunately, I couldn't make it, but. Let's say that was another story. Chris, you got any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, it does look interesting. Obviously it was a massive event with over 2 days, and I 30 talks and lots of presentations. It looks like something that's very good. We do actually have somebody coming to do a talk for us actually at our club about HamSCI later in the year, so we'll listen to that with interest. So it does sound like a good combination of citizens and scientists getting together and doing good stuff.
So Frank, what's your thoughts on this HamSCI thing?
Well, I'm very positive. I'm actually part of HamSCI. I've not been very active since I've had some health problems here for the last year or so. My focus has been on dealing with the Whisper database, and I just haven't made much progress on it here in the last couple of years. It's on my drawing board. To answer Martin Rothwell's question, yes, there is a call for papers and presentations. It's on the HamSCI website. It's not just for HamSCI affiliated people, but certainly it's dominated by HamSCI affiliated people, whether they're scientists like me. I'm listed as a participant from Mississippi State University, or people who are non-university, non-scientific members who are rank and file hams, if you will, from all walks of life. So there is a public call for that. They tend to have it up in the Northeast, and that's because the leader of that, Dr. Daniel Fristel at University of Scranton, that's where the locus of a lot of that is. I've not made one of these, but it is a good event to bring together what different people are doing. It's something that there's no particular ham fest, including Hamvention, that focuses on this kind of niche. So that's a real good thing. I will say, Martin, that the brightest spot for this that I saw is that the story was written by Rich Moseson, W2VU. Now, our listeners may recognize that name. He's the former longtime editor of the now defunct CQ magazine. And I've not been able to get a hold of Rich. I've been emailing him, wanting to talk to him about various things, and he just had gone silent. So I'm glad to see he's now back on the scene of amateur radio and doing some writing, and he in fact authored this particular story. So I see it as a good thing. It's supported by a number of grants and things, and I'm glad to see that the ARL is being supportive. Sometimes if they didn't invent it, they may turn a deaf ear, but sometimes they turn shining eyes toward it. So I'm glad that they're doing the latter in this case.
Yeah, that's a good one, Frank. And as I say, I think all in all, everything that HamSCI does seems to be great. And every time I've spoken to them, they do seem to be a very, very interesting bunch of people. Moving to our next news story. Over here in the UK, the RSGB have published new forms for exam question queries. So what they're saying is that if you dispute a question in your exam or whatever, you can argue with them or write a description of why you disagree with the question and why you think it's wrong. Interesting, because not going to go into this at all, but I have met people that might send quite a few of these emails in, haven't we, Chris?
I'm going to make no comments about that, but yeah, I suppose they try to streamline the process. That's all. I think, yeah, when I took my my full exam, there was a question there that I had to query after the exam with the examiner, and back then it was done on paper. It wasn't like the online exam you do now, the kind of computerized test we do now. But and then he said he would include that in his exam report back to the RSGB. So I think the old process was that's how it worked, and now of course we have online exams. Maybe it's slightly different. So I guess they just streamlined the process. And before, I think it was just a general way of writing to the RSGB and saying you spotted an error or something. But I imagine it's quite difficult to actually try and even find the question, the question that's been challenged in that state. So now the form asks you to. I think each question has a question number and there's like an exam number, so you can actually now pinpoint the particular question that you got the issue with, and you can. Make specific comments about it. So I think this is an improvement. That's all that they've made in terms of how you can feedback on questions, and that sounds quite good. It also talks about you can only actually submit a query if you are someone that's taken an exam. You can't, a proper exam. You can't do any of that. I'm not sure how else you'd be able to even do that anyway if you haven't taken the exam or how you know what the questions were. There is another form, a separate form, if you are challenging or want to raise some feedback around the mock exams and that sort of thing. So I think it's just an improvement. I think that's good. Things moving forward. So I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, and as I say, I think it's interesting. Now, I mean, I've been an instructor at the foundation and intermediate exam and need help on the full one for many years. I must admit, the last group of mock exams that were mock questions that were published, one of the papers I got all 26, one I got 24 right, and one I got 23 right. Now, I worry about that because I misunderstood either misunderstood a couple of questions or they were very debatable, what they should have been, very ambiguous. But so I think this is a good thing. Mine, when we did exams at the club, you were the club examiner, weren't you?
I was. We basically had we didn't really see the questions. We just got the answer. We got the answer sheet, and like question 1 is A, question 2 is B, whatever. The only time we would have ever looked at the questions, I think, would be if everybody was getting question number 25 wrong. Let's go back and look at what question 25 is. Is it badly worded? Is the answer wrong? Or have we missed something in the training? But I don't think that ever came up. I'd like to know a bit more about the backstory here. The fact that there is currently a method to report issues with questions. But I do wonder that if you have to make a tool, in fact, 2 tools, one for candidates to challenge a question and one for anybody else to inquire about the questions, what has instigated this? If the questions are generating that many responses that your existing system can't cope with it, is there something really? I know there have been like new questions coming in or due to come in. Is there something very, very wrong with the questions that they need a tool to be able to track this better, or are they just bringing this into the current online thing? I think they said you could write to them. You didn't say whether you wrote in via email or you had to physically put a letter in the post or something. But are they just coming into the 21st century with it? I don't know. But I would like to know more about the backstory. But if it is just coming into the 21st century, it's a bit late. But that's progress. At least it's getting there.
Yeah, well, a large part of this, mine also, is the fact that the exam's now being done online. So if you feel that you are being unfairly treated on an online exam, that's your only course of complaint. Whereas in a room where you've got ex students doing it, and as you say, if all students got one question particularly wrong, then it's something we really need to investigate as a group. So it's a different way of doing it. Leslie, what's your thoughts?
Oh, I've been listening to this one. Yes, you do occasionally get questions that are a little bit ambiguous, a little bit of knowledge, and some, yes, these things are picked up now and again, and they look at it, and like you said, if a particular question is causing a problem and everybody's getting it wrong, then they need to relook at it. And I have no problem with that because they can see that's happening. They've got the statistical tools to have a look at it. And they probably take, should we say, some view on how the marking should do. I knew that's how they used to work at college. And I can see why they've done it, because if I think it's Tony Kent was the chair of this particular examination standards committee. I know with radio amateurs they can spend an awful lot of time arguing over two words, I'm sorry, but I don't have the patience for that, and I would immediately buy a box of Valium. So that's just me looking on the funny side of things. Yeah, there's a process now. If there's a problem, students can put in a complaint about a particular question, and that's a good thing, because we all want to try and improve things, which is what it's all about.
Yeah, you're dead right on that one. Now, Frank, I know this is a UK story, and I've done your exams. I seem to remember that your question pools get published about 6 months before they go live, so that people can have a look at the questions, and if they disagree, they can make notes early on. Am I correct on that? How would you go about telling whoever it is that the questions are wrong?
You're correct. As I recall, Martin, they do that because, as we all know, the final questions themselves are all formally published with the correct answer. I think Leslie touched on an important point. Listeners probably know my background is I taught measurement theory to PhD students for several decades, and been involved with the ACT Corporation, for example, American College Testing. They do a college entrance exam. I've been involved with a number, and some of the theory that goes into this is relevant. Leslie touched on it. Now, I do not know Tony Kent or his background, and so there may be people who actually have some background in measurement here. But let me walk real quickly. We've talked about this in our rehearsal before. And just say you have a question, what does the acronym SWR stand for? Answer A might be squirrel to wire ratio. B might be shortwave receiving. Answer C might be standing wave ratio. Answer D might be none of the above. Okay, well, why do you have these different answers? Typically, there's one right answer, and it's the rightest, that is relatively the most accurate answer, because questions in a question pool have something called discrimination power, or the ability to discriminate fine point of a concept. And so shortwave reception or receiving, yeah, it could stand for that. And there might be some people who look at SWR, if they come from the shortwave listening world, they may have used that. They more likely would have had SWL for SW listening. So that might have some merit, but it's not the most correct answer. Now, squirrel to wire ratio is what we call a throwaway answer. Clearly, almost a joke in some cases. You clearly see that and you go, well, that can't be it. There are no squirrels involved, right? So we could debate that, I've realized, but that's a throwaway. So we've got the infamous answer C. When in doubt, always guess answer C. Now, how did that tendency come about? It's because test makers want to set up this discrimination capability relative to the concept that the question is measuring. And there was a psychological tendency for them to put the most correct answer, C, in at that point. Now, today with online testing and things, it's easy to randomize them. And the best practices are that any of these multiple choice ones, you would randomize them anyway to get rid of that. And you have answers like all the above or none of the above to make the question more difficult, quite frankly. Can the student or the test taker discriminate the finer points of the correct answer? Now, that's the psychometric theory behind test making, and I've done that for years and years and years. And as Leslie alluded, as a professor, I would take some of the tests that I would give in class, and I would actually analyze them. Which ones seemed to work, and was there a question that a lot of students, say 3/4 or above, got wrong, and they got shortwave receiving as opposed to standing wave? And I would go back and look at those questions. So I would hope that in that Tony's committee, as well as committees here in the U.S., actually spend a little time looking at questions that are, to use some really technical language, we'd call duds. They just didn't work. They misled the test taker and that sort of thing. So that's a little bit of more than any of our listeners really wanted to know about the art and science of test creation. But I do think giving people a chance to let the test makers get outside of their silo, that they may have some questions that they think, well, it's obvious what the answer is. And you go, well, no. I mean, you've got B here that a lot of people think would be correct, and you need to change it. So perhaps much ado about nothing from my response, Martin, but that's my take on this story. And that has nothing to do with it being a UK story. That's universal test creation.
Yeah, the universal test creation, though, is interesting. And I remember talking to somebody about this many years ago, and they were saying, I think it was, and don't hold me as gospel, guys, but I think it was when the City and Guilds used to do the full radio amateur exam, and they only did it twice a year, only ran it twice a year, but they used to mark the first 20 papers, and they marked the first 20 papers, and if everybody got question 4 wrong, they excluded that from the exam marks. So they put a line through all of them. So, you might have answered 90 questions, but maybe only 85 counted, because when they had a good look at the paper, they adjusted it down. But
Martin, that is a great practice. And I'll just chime in with this. Back in the 90s, I got a large software grant from a GIS company, ESRI, Environmental Systems Research Institute. They're the big dog in the market today worldwide. And they were putting some online courses on. And I was the first one at Mississippi State to teach GIS, and was kind of pioneering that. And they said, well, look, we'll give you these free courses. Let your students take them and help us. And so they would time how long it took the students to take. And it took my students in my class about twice as long as it did the people at ESRI. And they were trying to be nice, but they were making a down the nose look. Well, we know that students in Mississippi would be slower than those in California. And I let them go ahead. And I said, okay, so you're saying that my students take twice as long because they're not as bright as the people who actually write the software. Gee, if your people who write the software can take the test in half the time that my students are taking it, I'm pretty darn proud of how my students are doing it, because you're talking about the people that write the freaking software. And they kind of went, oh, well, we didn't think about it that way. And that illustrates my point. It's a great thing to have these new exams taken by some significant number of people to work out those kinks, and that's clearly a best practice. And I hope that ham exams, people who create them will engage in that. It's more work, but it yields better exams.
Yeah, oh yeah, Frank. There's some interesting stuff when you dig deep, as you say. You've given us a big insight onto this, and as I was talking to a guy who marked papers, and he was telling me a lot of this, but it's not general knowledge, I would suggest. Right, let's move to our next news story. I'm going back to you first, Frank, on this one. Earth, Venus, Earthbound for the first time for the Netherlands. So I believe Germany did it some years ago, but this is the first time the Netherlands have done it. And what an achievement. Over to you, Frank.
It is, and I'm sorry that Bill's was not able to join us, because he and I would be nattering about on changing DXCC and putting Venus on it. We've laughed before about adding the moon and maybe Mars at some point. The Open Research Institute, who Michelle Thompson is a person I believe who directs that, has actually come up with a budget, an RF link budget, those who do repeaters. Martin Rothwell, speaking to you, and you know what a link budget is for establishing contact with VHF, UHF, and above. So she's done that, and their team has done that for Earth, Venus, Earth. And so actually carrying this out it's just continuing our coverage of what we typically see as just kind of amazing radioactivity to do that. So I'm just amazed, but it comes about from people like the Open Research Institute and others spending some time and focusing on achieving a certain target.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting one. So, Chris, what's your thoughts on Earth, Venus, Earth? Well, it's 26 million miles away.
It's pretty incredible, isn't it? The fact we've done Earth, Moon, Earth is pretty clever, but Earth, Venus, Earth, I mean, you can barely spot Venus in the sky. So this is pretty amazing. And yeah, the second time it's been done in Europe and the first time for the Netherlands. So well done to the team there. The story talked a little bit about the Arecibo Observatory, which was used on a previous occasion, but sadly, as we know, that's no longer operational after they had their mishap a year or so ago. But no, this is very clever, and yeah, well done to the team that's done this.
Yeah, certainly a good one. Certainly a good one. Martin, what's your thoughts on this one?
Do you know what? When I first read this story, I did have to go back and check the date that it was published, because considering that yesterday was April the 1st, but it was published before that, so it's not an April Fool's joke. I remember we went to a talk a while ago about people that were doing Earth, Moon, Earth, and I think it inspired us to try that at the club. But they were obviously using big Yagis, and they were talking about the massive losses, and you're running 400 watts to hit the moon and then bounce it back again. And they said there's like a huge loss on there. Earth, Venus, Earth, or EVE, I'm curious about the size of the antenna or dish that was used and how much power, ERP they use. It looks like they use 23 SEMS and 13 SEMS. The other question I'd ask as well, I did see a demo online where they had someone was doing EME, and he was like sending a Morse code, and it's just dekeying, and then immediately hearing coming back because there is a delay, just the speed of how long it takes the signal to get there. I wonder what the delay is going to Venus. Why do this? Because you can. It's a pretty cool story. Space is one of these things that fascinates me. I think the concept of things like this, it was another talk we had at the club when they were talking about like the speed of light, and essentially radio waves is 300 million meters a second, which is 7.5 times around the Earth in 1 second. And then you realize that actually the light from space has been traveling for however, the signal to get to Saturn, for example, had been traveling for like half an hour before it got there. I'm curious the delay to Venus. I don't know how far away Venus is in that sense, but it's one of these things that fascinates me. I am going to be looking up more of this.
Well, if I remember rightly, and this is me using the grey matter between my ears. From the first time it was done, I think it was 4 minutes round trip. So you could say hello and wait 4 minutes and you'd hear hello.
God, that would freak you out if you said hello into space. You weren't expecting to land, and someone came back, hello.
Yeah. Probably done on Morse. Yeah. But hey, it's a different way of doing it. Leslie, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, Martin, it's pretty amazing. I know we did cover the story when it came out first. The German team did it. Just think about this for a moment. You've got a spinning object, the planet Earth, and you're firing a signal 26 million miles away. So it's effectively like firing a fine laser to another planet that's also spinning. So the two planets have got to be in sync. And then as you're spinning round, like you said, as the Earth is moving and the Venus is moving, you then get the signal back 4 minutes later. Wow. What else can I say, Martin? Absolutely amazing.
Well, it is, and I think this is the good thing. In fairness, we've done a lot of work, and this is something nice that when you tell people about amateur radio, Earth, Venus, Earth, certainly wakes them up. I mean, Earth, Moon, Earth, they get excited about, and then you go, well, yeah, we've actually done Earth, Venus, Earth, and they go, wow. So, yep, good one.
Martin, let me add a postscript.
Go on, Frank.
I see that AMSAT has been involved with this, and I'll just make a passing note. I've over the past 4 years, even as a life member of AMSAT that I am, I cannot get anyone from AMSAT US to sit for an interview to tell us about all the really cool things that the AMSAT Association is doing. I'll leave it there.
Okay, I'm sure I spoke to somebody from AMSAT, but I we'll talk offline on this one, Frank.
I'm hoping our listeners will do some talking as well,
Yeah.
if they're AMSAT members.
Please.
Yeah. Because it'd be good to hear a bit more from AMSAT, let's be honest.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right, guys, I'm going to move to our last news story. This is not an amateur radio news story as such, but it will affect us amateurs. It's a UK story. I'm going to go to Chris first on this one. But Ofcom have just proposed a direct smartphone to satellite connections. Now, they're saying the satellite, the phone you've got in your pocket, not going out and buying a new one. They're saying that they're making it available that if the mobile phone operators want to do this, they're going to increase the coverage by going to satellite. I guess there's going to be a cost to doing this, a premium, but what do you think, Chris?
Well, it's an interesting one. Like you were saying, there already are sat phones, but they work on very specific frequencies and designed to work, and you need a subscription to that particular service. This is, like you said, talking about your existing phone being able to talk to satellites, which I guess would mean that would potentially eliminate, spots where we don't get a signal today. If you're outside of a service area, you're out in the kind of a remote area where we don't have coverage, this would certainly be a good solution. I guess the reason they're having these consultations is because there's a need for this, and perhaps the technology exists now. And also, it means if there's an outage or something, we'd still be able to have communication. So this is an interesting one. It talks about the fact that there was a similar assessment done over in the US by the FCC, and that was authorised already. So I don't know if there's any pressure from any of the communication companies to allow this. I know Starlink might be one of the ways this might work, because Starlink is a massive number of really small satellites up there which pass by the Earth continually, and there's already a Starlink service for internet access. But this looks like it's Vodafone that will perhaps do the trial if it was approved. So, yeah, this would be in fact, it talks about there's already been a test done under a trial license with Vodafone. using a phone. So they did some testing there. So yeah, if this moves forward, it could, again, it's a bit similar to the first time we talked about batteries. This could be a game changer. It might be that they decide we no longer need these cell towers everywhere and they can run everything with satellites. I don't know. That may be more expensive. So it'll be interesting to see how it works and interesting to see what it might cost. If we're talking about satellite, the mobile phone companies having to put satellites in space, that might be an expensive thing to do. So it'll be interesting to see how, what this has been kind of aimed at and how it might be rolled out if it's successful.
Yeah, well, at the moment, cell towers can only support so many connections at any one time. And I'm guessing because I don't fully know, but a satellite has got to support a lot of stations because it will be seen by a lot of phones. However, long term, as you say, Chris, it may be that all the cell towers, like I've got opposite my house, will disappear and the countryside will be nice again if we go to satellites.
But Martin, will it satisfy all the 5G conspiracy theorists who are thinking?
They'll have to have tin hats, won't they? Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
So, Martin, what's your thoughts?
When you say cell tower, you mean the COVID transmitters, right? No, don't believe that before anyone writes in. I'm kidding. It was a joke.
It's a joke.
It's a joke.
It's called humour.
There's no proof in that. Right. So I heard about this because they were talking about this on my work amateur radio group. And I think I saw somewhere that T-Mobile in America were trialing this. It was working, I believe, on Starlink. It's an exciting idea. I wonder what it will cost. I wonder if longer term, if it gets rolled out, it will drive down the cost of proper satellite phones, like companies like Iridium, Inmarsat, people like that, or even potentially put those companies at risk. I don't know what else they do, but if it's at least that division, those companies that are making satellite phones, I don't know. I'd like to know more about the satellite network it will use, if it is Starlink, because I believe the trials in the US have been. There seem to be quite a lot of people posting online that they don't want to connect to that network. Without getting political, the owner of that network is in the media for the wrong reasons at the moment. And I personally wouldn't want my mobile subscription fund, irrespective of that, I wouldn't want my subscription funding his empire. I wonder, in the same way that we have a choice of mobile phone providers, we've got, 4 actual providers in the UK. I know there are MVNOs and things, but there are 4 physical networks in the UK. Maybe longer term there'll be an option. Hey, you can have Vodafone for your, your normal day-to-day phone use, and you can have, X, mobile or X satellite network for this. I say X, Y, Z, whatever. Maybe there'll be a choice of that too. I don't know. It's exciting technology. I think it's potentially very good because obviously people that do go hiking, they go into terrain that isn't covered by mobile networks. They potentially then have a lifeline. I know you can buy like personal locator beacons that do run on companies like Inmarsat and things like that. So it could be another good thing, and equally for like tracking people as well. If they're moving around, if you're going to get lost out in when you're on a hike or in the Highlands or something like that, you could locate them in the case of emergency. So potentially a lot of good coming out of this. I'd like to see where it goes. I'd like to see more information of it. But as the story says, Vodafone have trialed it. It looks like they're interested in it. Let's see where it goes. But I'll be honest with you, I don't see the mobile towers going away anytime soon because it's just capacity and also latency. The satellite broadband has quite a bit of latency. What we're doing now, you couldn't really do that over a satellite just because of the delay. So, yeah, let's see where it goes.
Yeah, I agree with you that things, latency and one thing or another. But it's going to fill those holes where there are no signals, effectively. So you're dead right. It means that you'll be more contactable and all those sort of things. And, yeah, in the short term, as you say, we won't lose all the cell towers around the UK. However, I never say never. If they go over to satellites and there's enough capacity on a satellite, why would you want to run run it. And equally, Martin, they might use one of these new batteries we're talking about in the satellite.
Yeah.
Yeah, going forward. Anyway, Leslie, what's your thoughts on this one?
It's all progress, isn't it? Things move on. Technology moves on. Is it going to be expensive to start off with? Probably. Long term, the price will just drop until we've got mobile phones at the moment, and every man, woman, and child on the planet has got one of these phones. That's how amazing these things are now. Yes, there are still dead spots. Tell me about it. When we do our field days, we know all about that. So I think it's coming. Let's see what happens. Bring it on.
Yeah, it's positive, isn't it? Positive. Frank, I know this is a UK story, but as the guys have said, you guys in the States have trialled this as well. I think it's a good thing going forward. What do you think?
It is, and certainly amateur radio will benefit directly. The Starlink product, for example, has a relatively new option for a mobile Starlink. Remember, DirecTV used to have one for television here in the States where you could put it in your RV or camper van or whatever and do that. But here's my take on it. We went to this, I guess, a year ago or sometime during the past year, and my current cellular provider is AT&T, and I'm talking on that right now. For example, I'm not on my usual equipment to do the podcast. And it's supposed to be for, in quote, emergency communications. Well, how do you define that? I haven't tested it, so I really don't know. But AT&T is part of the large billion plus FirstNet that came out of a lot of the emergency preparedness efforts after hurricanes and other things to both harden their cell towers, get many of them in flood prone areas up off the ground so that the equipment wouldn't go out, and to develop mobile deployments for cellular service, which is terrestrial based service. So my understanding is this, and this is what I would project. Martin Rothwell and I have some very similar thoughts on it. It wouldn't be a binary switch. Hey, we're going to dump terrestrial, what we might just call repeaters in the U.S. to go all satellite. I don't think the capacity is nearly that robust. Starlink ran into this when they would open a particular area that had very little to no internet service. They quickly had the number of allocations that they could handle for that time period eaten up within a matter of a couple of weeks. And people were waiting on them. Here, take my money. And so the capacity wouldn't be there for just a binary switch. But if you look at it as a sequential handover, just like we hand over from one cell tower to another as people travel. I was talking to my friend Mike N5DU this morning as he was headed to North Mississippi on business, and there was a known spot on Interstate 55 where you hand off and it's just a little too far. And so we said, okay, we're going to have a brownout, and boom, there we went. He called me back. You have that with terrestrial towers today. You can have that with satellite. So I would guess this, that it will be not an either or, but a both, and you get handed off to a satellite as you lose terrestrial cellular service. And that would be what I would guess for the foreseeable future, Martin. I've not tried it here, supposedly on this iPhone 16 that I'm holding in my hand right now. I could do that, just not had time or interest to check into it. But it's an amazing set of progress, as Leslie and Chris have indicated as well. And I'm glad to see the UK is getting into it. So good on folks who are putting new things out there.
Yeah, I'm pleased. And despite the fact that Colin reckons that I should have a Nokia Blockia, one of these non-smartphones, and I wouldn't mind. I don't mind. I don't use a smartphone that often, but making this, all normal phones will work through that system as well, so it's not a problem. So interesting story. Right, let's find out what the guys have been up to since the last time we spoke. Frank, I'm going to let you go first, purely because, you know, you're not on full power at your house, and I don't want to suddenly lose you. So, what have you been up to since the last podcast?
Well, since the last podcast, as you know, we had a feature in the literal last episode involving three people with the ARRL, and Dan Romanchuk co-hosted that with me, and we sent the people mentioned there at the ARRL an opportunity to sit for an interview and respond to what our previous guest had to say. We've heard crickets from them on that. The offer's still there. Be happy to have them sit for an interview, and we'll hear what they've got to say. Besides that, I've been continuing on looking at this question of GMRS licensure in the U.S. and its relationship to ham radio, thanks to the two guys I've been collaborating with, Luke and Bob, and I'm not looking at their call signs. I did mention this in the last episode I was on. We've identified a little over 100,000 hams who have GMRS licenses. And of course, I've got those geocoded. I have them on maps. And as soon as I get it completed, I'll share some maps on my K4FMH blog that may migrate over to Fox Mike Hotel to see where they are. And one of the key questions that gave rise to this was, okay, well, why is it hams would get a GMRS license? Or the converse might be, a GMRS license holder might get their ham license. Certainly a tech. Is it primarily technicians here in the U.S. that are getting GMRS, and they're kind of similar operations as a technician and a GMRS license holder? I'll have some analysis of those results. I give the readers a tease. The answer is a resounding no. It will be surprising at how many non-techs have GMRS licenses and where. And I'll have some of those results here, hopefully in the next month or so, or maybe by the time I'm back on the podcast. I've been continuing on with antenna design on some vertical antennas. I'll report on those when I have some progress. We've had bad weather here, and I don't like to replicate the Ben Franklin experiment with a kite and a string out in thunderstorms. So I'll test my antennas when we don't have thunderstorms and lightning. Thank you very much. And been busy with another project that came out of the GMRS work. It hit me when Luke pulled the February, I believe it was, slice of 2025 of all the amateur licenses, and I geocoded them. I've wanted to, for a long time, look at their neighborhoods. And so what I've done is I've geocoded them and put them in what the U.S. Census Bureau calls its block group geography. And that's the closest geography to a neighborhood that we have. And I've assembled median age and median income and some things like that for the neighborhoods that all the hams in the U.S. live in. And the last thing I'm doing is taking all the satellite imagery from the last satellite compilation for land use, land cover. Do you live out in the forest? Do you live on pasture lands? Do you live on concrete and steel, called urban areas or cities? And that's quite a bit of processing capability. I don't have access to the big computers at NASA or my university anymore, so I'm doing it piecemeal on my workstation here at home. But I'll have the land use land cover that every ham in the U.S. lives on. And I'll then try to describe the characteristics of neighborhoods for U.S. hams. And while we don't have surveys of for example, that famous question of how old are hams, what's the median age for hams, we will know the median age of the people in the neighborhood that they live in. And if there's anything that we do know is that people live in neighborhoods that are more like themselves than they are different. So, Martin, I've been doing some research about amateurs in the U.S., and it's taking a bit of my focus. But I'll have some results there probably in a month or so. Good research takes time. So that's mostly what I've been up to since the last podcast, Martin.
Yeah, and you did show me what you were up to last time we had an offline chat, and it looks very interesting, Frank. So we'll be pleased to see the final result on that one. Worthwhile doing. Right. Leslie, what have you been up to since the last time you were on the podcast?
Well, I've not been involved in much amateur radio practical stuff, which I really like doing, but I've been doing an awful lot of work on the club archive, which I think some of the panel members have already seen. And it's about 5,500 documents and photographs and minutes and
incredible work.
Thank you.
Work that Leslie's doing.
Thank you, Frank. Much appreciated. So it was basically a photo. It was all thrown into a box that was stuck at the bottom of the cupboard. So I've scanned all the photographs, got some of the local history. And one of the things I found out that was really interesting, I was trying to find one of the old locations that the club was at. And went through all the library and couldn't find it at all. Couldn't find the picture of this particular establishment. So what I did is I went onto Google Maps, and it's got a facility there where you can actually change the year that you're looking at. So obviously 2025 now. And I went back to 2008, and there was this beautiful picture of where the club used to be. And obviously it's been replaced by blocks of flats and all the rest of it. But I was really surprised on that facility on Google Maps, and I'm really pleased about that. I'm learning a lot how to do it and how to download stuff. It's very much trying to load stuff up onto the Google Drive and then leave it overnight. It's about 15.5 gig. So the files are tad big at the moment. So I've started cutting it up into manageable chunks. So that's what I've been doing, Martin. But it's it's an ongoing task, I think. But I think the basis of it has been done, and it's just a case of now members can add on to it as they feel fit. Over to you.
Yeah, I saw it. You phoned me up one day last week and said, "Hey, do you want to see what we've been up to?" And I said, "Yes, of course." Had a look, and it is impressive, Leslie, and your club will be really pleased that you got it and done the work for them. Now, you talk about Google Maps, and I was saying to you, when I contracted for the railway, I used to have to work at this really obscure, off the beaten track railway station. You know, it was very difficult to find at the best of times if you didn't know it was there. And the Google car went by taking the photographs, and for about a year the station manager and I were pictured outside the station drinking a cup of tea. So that's true. But
Martin,
yeah.
I have an astrophysicist friend. He's retired, lives in New Orleans. The last 3 times they've updated the Google Maps, the street view picture, he's taken his trash out in all 3 pictures.
Oh, got him. Yeah. Well, this is a bit of fun, Google Maps, when you sometimes look back on it. Martin, what have you been up to since last time we spoke?
Well, clearly not as much as everybody else. I've been listening to the talk group. It's been quite quiet recently. But I did manage to catch Phil on there the other day while I was on my way up to my parents. But by the time we started speaking, I was mostly there. I did see a post actually on social media about 2 meters being wide open. And I think the comment was VK is calling EU. And I was processing that in my head for a split second. And it was only at that moment when I realised what the date was. So whoever came up with that, very funny. He did amuse me for about 3 seconds. And I'm like, hang on, that can't be right. And like, oh, yeah, it's April the 1st, isn't it? Other than that, I've been doing some funky stuff with some radio links at work. We had an event for Comic Relief, which is a charity in the UK. And we do something where we throw gunge over our senior management team for charity. And that always attracts quite a big audience, both in our canteen space where we ran it and also on the balconies looking down. And the balconies are there, but they've got glass windows around. And so we tried to get audio from our PA system with music and commentary and stuff up to the floors above. And some of my colleagues telling me that, we're going to have to run like at least 200 meters of, XLR audio cable. It's going to be an absolute nightmare. I'm like, just leave it to me. Don't worry about that. Because there was no real direct route up to these floors short of up the outside of the building or up a fire escape or something like that. So I cobbled together a bit of a radio link, gave it a bit of a try, put a bigger antenna on it, and quite legally managed to get our signal up several floors and through PA systems on several floors. And the boss was absolutely blown away. Like, how on earth did you pull that off? I'm like, you just hired someone that knows what he's doing. So that was a bit of fun, and it saved us a lot of cabling, that's for sure. But yeah, otherwise, radio-wise, sadly, not much else. I've not been as active as I normally would. Just not had the time.
Yeah, shame, mate. And I haven't caught you on the talk grip either recently, but let's hope we can get to do more of it soon. Chris, what have you been up to since last time we spoke?
Well, like the other guys, not a massive amount of radio, although I have actually bought a new radio. I was on a well-known Chinese purchasing site, shall we say, and I was interested in it. I thought I'd just see what one looked like. So I bought it's actually a mobile radio. It's called the Hiroyasu CQ7373. Interesting name. And it's a mobile radio. It's got a detachable head. It's a 2 in 70, so a dual band radio, does 50 watts on 2 meters, 45 watts on 7 centimeters. So I've not had a lot of time to play with it yet. I took it up to the club on Monday night and I had a little play. It's should we say it's not quite the same quality as what we're used to from perhaps some of the Japanese manufacturers, but I've not spent a lot of time with it yet. But it looks interesting, shall we say? So I will report back at some point when I've had a bit more time to have a play with it. So that's probably the main thing that I've been up to, Martin. But no, radio wise, not a massive amount. I've been starting to prepare for our AGM for the club that's coming up in a few weeks, and that's always a bit of a admin job, shall we say. But no, apart from that, no, not a massive amount, I'm afraid, Martin.
No, but I know you've been doing family things and visits and one thing and another as well. So we're coming out of winter. I'm sure we'll be far more involved. And I won't give you grief over not doing too much because I haven't terrible lot. Now, what I will say, and this is honest, this is not me trying to rag you. There are, to the best of my knowledge, there were no April Fools in amongst our stories. We've never done it in the past. I think it is funny at the time, and I saw a couple on April the 1st, and I thought they were funny. But when you look at it, that somebody might actually download this at Christmas next year, and you're thinking, no, it would just, if they believed it, it wouldn't be right. So not everybody downloads instantly. Lots of people download a whole chunk and then listen to it and then come back and download another chunk.
But Martin, the one about moving the stones at Stonehenge is true.
Is it?
It is. I saw him doing it.
Yeah, if you say so.
They have to unscrew the sun and move it back an hour, don't they? It's a big light bulb, yeah?
Right. Well, I'm going to suggest that the listeners just take that one on their own merit and know what a bunch of jokers you lot are. So.
Martin, there was a story that quite a late breaking one that Ed Durant has emailed us about literally during the recording of the podcast. Apparently it's been, and this is not an April Fool, so it's not a funny thing. There has been a small fire at the Friedrichshafen venue, but thankfully it was just in one of the catering areas. So thankfully it's not going to affect the event that we're going to be going to later in the year. But I'll just not mention that.
Yeah, well, I saw that, and it is one of the catering venues that we've used as a group to get stuff from it when we were at Friedrichshafen. I think we got a couple of bits and pieces from there. But there you go. Anyway, also, so there are no April Fool's deliberate ones anyway on this.
Are you not going to mention the elephant in the room, the fact that Leslie wasn't able to be here and Bill Barnes has played his part all evening? He sounds exactly like Leslie.
You're going to behave. You're not going to let me finish, are you?
No.
No.
Go on, Bill. You can start talking with your Pennsylvanian accent now. You can let it go now.
They're getting at you, Leslie.
I don't care.
Yeah, I know. Okay. So, yeah, I have been on a talk group a little bit. Not been on the radio mobile. I've been running around like headless chicken for Mrs. B because she's now recovering and we're now more active. And, if she goes for a walk, I tend to go with her because she's still got one crutch. Colin was over last weekend. He popped over Saturday. Sunday was Mothering Sunday, but he came over, saw his mum, and then went to football. Come back, saw his mum, and went home. Long day, I would suggest, but it was good fun. He did give me his old Surface Go 3. Now, about 2 years ago, he gave me a Microsoft Surface, the original one. And I'm sorry, you Windows guys, but they ain't powerful enough to run Windows. And I'm not buying a copy of Windows for it. So it's now got Linux on it. And it worked perfectly okay. So I got a Surface Go 3 Colin gave me. And a few little bits and pieces. I've been messing around with the FunCube dongle. For some reason, I bought one Christmas, and I got given another one. And I got two FunCube dongle Pros, and I was messing around with them on the Surface Go and trying to use some of the software there. Unfortunately, it doesn't directly run the FunCube dongle software, or I've not found it yet, but just playing. And I've done some network changes here in the house, and next week, after the podcast release, because it'd be stupid of me to try before, I am going to do a router replacement, an upgrade. So early part of next week, you may find that the D-Star is off for a few hours while I replace the router, because the D-Star encoder is actually done at my house, not up in the Docklands on the data center. So that one might happen. And last but not least, in just over a week, not the Saturday after we release, is 145 Alive, where people get together on 2 meters. It's happening between 12 and 3 o'clock on Saturday this time. Last couple have been Sunday, but it'll be on Saturday. So not a lot from me. Mrs. B's kept me pretty damn busy, I would suggest. But I'm glad to say she's making a great recovery. So that's what I've been up to. So all that's left for me to do now is to thank the guys for turning up, and we'll move on to the next part of the podcast. I'd like to thank Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, mate. I'd like to thank Mr. Martin Rothwell, M0SGL.
Thank you, it's been fun.
It's been fun, yeah. I'd like to thank Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH.
Thank you very much.
Great to have you, and I'm glad your temporary configuration held up, Frank. And I know you're worried about the audio, but you're perfectly legible. And last but not least, I'd like to thank Mr. Leslie Butterfield, G0CIB. Good to have you, Leslie.
Cash in bank. Yeah, thanks very much for having me on Martin. It's been a giggle as always.
It always is, isn't it? And unfortunately, Mr. Bill Barnes, WC3B, was unable to make it tonight. He got caught with a work commitment. So never mind, Bill, you'll be back with us shortly, I'm sure. So I'm going to say 73, guys, and we'll move to the next part of the podcast. 73.
Cheerio.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.ICQPodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.ICQPodcast.com.
Now it's time for the news in brief stories with me, Colin M6BLY. Just a couple of news stories for you this week. Currently ongoing is World Autism Acceptance Week, and ham radio enthusiasts around the world are doing their bit to promote this event. And as they had work on the acceptance of people with autism around the world. So there's a load of special event stations that are potentially available here for you to work and, as they help promote the cause of autism acceptance. So we'll pop a link on this for you on the online so you can find more information. But as I say, around the world are a load of special event stations for you potentially to work. The CQ Amateur Radio Hall of Fame is seeking their nominations for the 2025 class of inductees. This was started back in 2001, and it's to recognise those individuals, whether licensed radio amateurs or not, who significantly affected the course of amateur radio, the radio amateurs who, in the course of their professional lives, had an impact on their professions or on world affairs. So nominations can be sent to Tom Roscoe, and we'll pop the email for him on our ICQ podcast page for you, so you can send your nominations across to Tony. Right, well now we're going to head over to our features episode, which is our spring look at Q&As that we get given to us throughout the course of our interaction with amateurs around the world. As always, hope you enjoy.
And now for this episode's feature from the ICQ Podcast.
Hi guys, for this feature, it's a questions and answers feature. Now every now and again people ask me questions and I give an answer. And I give a fair answer, I believe. Now, some of you may disagree with me, but I don't make any money or anything out of this. I just give my advice freely. So, here are a few questions that I've been asked over the last few weeks, and I thought I'd run them by because it might be interesting for some of you. First one was, what power supply should I buy? A new ham asked me. And effectively, I think that we have 3 different power supplies, and it really does depend on what you are trying to achieve. Now, those of you who've been in the hobby a long time are thinking, what's this silly old fool on about? When he says there's 3 power supplies, 3 types of power supply. Well, I'm talking about the old analog type power supply. I'm talking about a switch mode power supply, obviously, and I'm talking about a battery as the third one. Now, analog power supplies, really great. They work. They don't produce noise, RF noise, because they're not switching. They're just analog. But they are very heavy and often more expensive because of the big transformer inside them. Switch mode power supplies, on the other hand, are quite light. They're smaller. They work very, very well these days, and a good switch mode power supply doesn't produce sufficient noise to give us any problems. But you do have an oscillator running in there, and you could have harmonics. The really good switch mode power supplies actually have a knob on them that allows you to move the frequency of the oscillator a little bit, should it be interfering with the station you're trying to work. So that's an option there. I said the next third one was a battery. A battery, you're going to get no noise, obviously, because it's pure DC. Away you go, no problems at all. However, a battery, you will require a charger. So you've got to cost effectively work in a charger if you're going to work off a battery. And I know people who work off battery at home, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's purely their choice. So really, the choice is yours, whether you go analog, switch mode or battery. But the most important thing I think I would suggest is, whatever you do for an analog or a switch mode power supply, look at something that can supply at least 25 amps. Now you might say, I'm just starting out in the hobby, I don't need a power supply that big. You will. If you move through the hobby, you might as well buy a power supply that's going to give you long service as you move through various licensing arrangements as your license increases and you have more power. And the other thing is, if you take a power supply that can only just supply the current you want, then you won't be able to add any accessories that require power. So, choose a 25 amp power supply, whichever one you go with, analog or digital. Or if you're going to have batteries, you've got to make sure it will supply a good rate of current. Number 2, which handy-talkie should I buy? Oh, that's the $2 million question, this one. Well, it's interesting. Which walkie-talkie or handy-talkie do you buy? Well, it really depends on you. Once again, we go around the analog or digital mode. Now, analog is straightforward, normally FM, and I would suggest if you're going to buy an analog handy-talkie, buy a dual band one, at least dual band. You can get more, but a single band ones, unless you really only intend to do one band, which is very unlikely, at least get yourself a dual band walkie-talkie or handy-talkie. Now, you can get these from all over the world. They're great. There's some expensive ones. The big 3 manufacturers, ICOM, Kenwood and Yaesu, make some very nice radios. But they're expensive. They're well built and they're nice quality. However, you can also buy lower grade and work just as well for you from China, and some of the lower grade radios do actually work very well. The Quansheng UV5R works extremely well, and I say I've had a lot of success with that. Going to digital, this is where your problem starts. Digital radios are normally a lot more expensive than pure analog ones, but they do analog and digital. So you can use them to talk to your friends on analog radio if required. However, the biggest problem with digital is there are at least 3, and some would say more, modes of voice transmission you can get. And the big 3, the main 3 today, are DMR, D-Star, and Yaesu Fusion. And guess what, guys? None of those will talk to each other. So if you have a DMR radio, native out of the box, it ain't going to talk to a Fusion or a D-Star radio unless you're going to use analog. So your choice is quite difficult if you decide to go digital. There is a big learning curve for setting up digital. DMR has probably got the biggest learning curve. Yaesu Fusion the easiest. But it really depends on what repeaters you've got in your area and things like that if you're going the digital route. And once again, it's an interesting one. Your budget, you need to have a look at the budget. The big 3 manufacturers produce various versions of their radios. However, there are cheaper radios that work very well on the digital modes. So your budget comes into play on this one quite heavily. Now, another question I get asked is the Xiegu G90 transceiver, is it any good? Well, that was a nasty question to ask me, wasn't it? I actually own a Xiegu G90. I've been very pleased with mine. It's not the prettiest radio in the world, but it actually works. It's not too heavy. It's the sort of radio that I take out to go portable. It has a maximum of 20 watts. It's not too hungry on the battery. And in fairness, I've had some great contacts over most of Europe with mine, either from home or when I've been out portable, running a maximum of 20 watts. Now, I know that if I got up earlier, and in the sweet spot of propagation time, I could work further. But the Zygo Not G90 does everything I've ever wanted it to do. The only one thing I would have liked extra, and this is me, is I would have liked 6 meters in it. But for an HF only radio, she's a lovely radio. She works very, very well. It's got a very good display on it and pretty much works well. What I would suggest, though, is you look for the relevant manual online, because there are better manuals from Radio Odyssey that give you an update on how to use it, and it works very, very well in my opinion. Now the last one, and this one's the hand grenade in the room. I got asked, what is a NAT and how do I run one? Okay, well, for all the old boys are now switching off. But what is a NAT? Well, a NAT is a getting together of a number of radio amateur operators, often at a club meeting or a club get-together, and to have a discussion on the radio. Now, depending on what part of the world and what type of net it is, you can find it runs different ways. So I'm going to give you a few clues. In the States, often it's a login net. So you call in and you register that you're available. And quite often that's about all they want from you, is it's a check-in net. So somebody sits there and you call in and you check in. In the UK, if it's a rag chewing net, which often the UK ones are, you'll either have a net controller which will bring you in, and that person, every time anybody finishes, they pass the frequency back to the net controller, and the net controller sits in the middle and it operates like a star. So he'll push it out to one person, they'll have their say, come back to the centre and go out to the next person. And the net controller controls the order that the people are transmitting. The other way that sometimes happens in the UK is you have a net controller and they do a circle net. So they'll tell you which order everybody goes in, and operator A will pass the frequency to operator B, pass it to C, to D, and back to the net controller, and they go around the circle. So a little bit confusing possibly. Hopefully I haven't totally confused you. And these are just a few of the questions and answers that some of the new people coming into the hobby have actually asked me. But as I say, if you guys think I've not got this right, please let me know, because, you know, I get asked all sorts of questions and I like to try and give a fair answer to the people that ask me. Thank you very much.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, as always, we hope you got some enlightenment from our Q&A feature this episode, and I know that these are very popular and certainly do either remind people of certain things, or, as I say, you know, does add to knowledge of people, not only just the newbies in our hobby, but some of us who have been in it for a long period of time. So I hope you got something from this episode's feature. Couple of bits of feedback to mention here that we've received since our last episode. Nick Hansen, Mike 7 November Hotel Romeo, asked, have we started planning, thinking about going to UK Hamfest and when we might be there? So the answer is yep, it was planned, we're booked, and we have a team going. At the moment, it's Martin Butler, Edmund, and myself going for Friday and Saturday. Chris Howard is definitely confirmed for Friday at the moment, and we're hoping he might be able to stretch that into Saturday. So that'll be our team for UK Hamfest this year. And Nick, you'll be happy to know it's very easy to see us. Very bright orange shirts. Look for very bright orange shirts, and you've got every chance of being an ICQ person. So, yep, just let you know there. I say we'll be at the show there. We also got an interesting piece of feedback from Harry August. Now, I'm not convinced this is maybe Harry's actual name. There's no amateur called Harry August on QRZ, will it be? But I don't think Harry thought I'd publicise his piece of feedback. But we are a very open podcast, as everyone knows, and we do certainly take on board everybody's opinion. So Harry basically took umbrage with our news story and coverage of the returning astronauts from the International Space Station, and said he thought he was listening to an amateur radio podcast and felt that UK folks were pontificating and gaslighting about US politics and resources, and all the resources from the UK which hasn't funded the International Space Station since 2011. The UK is welcome to create its own space program and global weather research if you can divert resources from stifling your own public freedom. The US money is certainly not your main spend, and if we recall, we rejected your influences over 200 years ago and spent no true money saving your butts twice last century. So, okay, Harry, you're entitled to your opinion. I did reply back to Harry twice in relation to, say, that section. Unfortunately, he hasn't replied back. But what I would say is, Harry, is that the roundtable discussion about news stories is there to generate thoughts and opinions on, say, the stories that are going on in our hobby and around our hobby. And it's great that it did allow you to express your opinions about what's going on in those hobbies. And as I say, as per the fantastic quote by the English author Evelyn Beatrice Hall, I may disapprove of what you say, but I would defend your definitely right to say it. Hence the reason I've included it in this episode as feedback section. What I would say, though, is I think everybody does value the ICQ podcast for, is that we are one of very few shows across the whole of podcasting that has such a flavour of international voices. So, as I say, we do have so many people from, say, the US, the UK, Ireland, and from places like Germany, and also contributors from around the world. So I'd like to think we do get quite a balanced view. But Harry, you took the time to send the email, so I said I'd include it in the episode. And as I say, if you didn't think I would do it, there you are, Harry, you are mentioned. Now, as I say, talking about getting mentioned, our monthly subscription donors are amazing and they help keep us advert-free on your ICQ podcast. So we'd like to thank everybody for their very kind donations and, as I say, keeping us advert-free. You can do your bit if you've enjoyed this episode by going to ICQPodcast.com/donate. And as I've always mentioned, anything you send our way is always greatly appreciated and go towards the running cost of your ICQ podcast. So please, as they do, consider us. I'd like to thank Chris, Mike 0, Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike 0, Sierra Golf Lima, Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, and Leslie, Golf 0, Charlie India Bravo, for taking part in the news roundtables and helping us generate thoughts. So many thanks for doing that there for us, guys. Right, also, just one other last thing to mention as well. We are a few weeks away from Friedrichshafen, where we'll be attending next as an ICQ podcast team. We'll say we're doing Friedrichshafen this year rather than Dayton. So, say, if you haven't yet got your tickets and you're thinking about it, feel free to, grab a ticket there. There is a rumour that, as I say, we may be short on beer this year in Germany because there was a small incident in the big beer hall. Hopefully, they will get that sorted in time for our arrival in just over 2 months' time. So, fingers crossed in that there. But in the meantime, I'm going to bid you all 73s. Hope you want to continue to enjoy our wonderful hobby and look forward to talking to you again in a fortnight's time. 73s all.